You ever walk into a room that's supposed to be magical but feel like you just stepped into a stranger's dream? That was me, 10 floors up at the Vellum Museum's rooftop gala, watching champagne flutes sparkle under string lights, while everyone around me pretended nothing in their lives had ever gone wrong. My name is Julia Renner. I'm 42, an urban architect in Chicago, and that night was supposed to be my 10th wedding anniversary. Supposed to be. Instead, it felt like the longest networking event I'd ever been trapped in. Except the person I was supposed to be celebrating with didn't seem interested in me at all. Victor had planned it all, or at least had his assistant do it. The gala doubled as some industry event, hosted in a museum tower I'd helped design years earlier. I recognized the lines of my own work in every glass panel and steel beam. Funny how even my buildings felt warmer to me than my husband did lately. Victor looked sharp as ever, of course. Black tailored suit, perfect tie knot. That effortless charm he used to turn on me, and now mostly reserved for real estate developers and city council members. He turned to me as we stepped into the elevator up to the gala and said, "That dress is nice." That was it. Nice. I was wearing an emerald satin gown I'd picked deliberately. Classy but low-key, like me. It had a kind of quiet confidence to it, like I was still trying to believe we had something worth dressing up for. When we stepped out onto the rooftop, I pasted on a smile and followed Victor through clusters of polished people, clinking glasses, and trading polished lies. Some of them were old contacts from the zoning board or city planning offices. A few nodded at me like they almost remembered who I was. Victor introduced me when it was convenient. "She's behind the 7th and Halstead redesign," someone said, half surprised, like it had just clicked. "Didn't know you two worked together." "We did," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Once upon a time." Victor barely glanced at me, just kept checking his smartwatch, murmuring, "Let's keep moving." I lost count how many times he looked down at that thing, like he was expecting something better than this night. There were photographers, industry types with DSLR cameras snapping away like we were some sort of power couple. We posed once or twice. His arm went around my back, light and rehearsed, and when he whispered "smile," it didn't feel like a request. It felt like stage direction. At one point, I excused myself to the bar just to breathe. I ordered sparkling water, hadn't touched the champagne yet, and watched the skyline instead. From up here, the city looked clean, ordered, beautiful, like everything I once believed our life would be. "You okay?" a woman asked, brushing past me. I smiled and nodded, but no, I wasn't. Because as I looked back at Victor laughing with some councilwoman, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit until now. I didn't recognize the man I married. And worse, I didn't know if he even saw me anymore. Back home, it was quiet. Too quiet for a couple that had just celebrated a milestone. No champagne toast, no leftovers from dessert, not even a tossed pair of shoes in the hallway to suggest anyone had been excited to come home. I kicked off my heels and sat on the edge of the bed. The zipper of my dress caught for a moment, and I didn't bother fighting with it. I just sat there, emerald fabric pooling around me, staring at the muted reflection of myself in the mirror across the room. This was supposed to be a partnership. That's what we used to call it anyway, when we stayed up until 2 a.m., sketching floor plans together, arguing over street setbacks and glass angles, bouncing ideas back and forth until they came alive. Now, we barely talked unless it was about bills or logistics. He was always on a call, or about to head out, or just getting back. But never really here. It hadn't started all at once. It crept in like a hairline crack in concrete, slow, invisible at first, until the foundation started to give. One missed dinner, then a last-minute business trip, then silence where there used to be ideas. He'd stopped asking me about work, about anything really. I could have told him I was demolishing the Empire State Building, and he probably would have nodded and said, "Sounds great." A few weeks ago, I had come across something strange. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a pen in his bag while we were waiting for takeout. That's when I saw the rolled-up plans, architectural layouts on thick printer paper. I recognized them instantly. They were mine. The same layouts I'd spent months perfecting for the West Loop revitalization pitch. But these were cleaner, glossier, with a different logo, no watermark, no credits. And most importantly, my name wasn't on them. I remember holding the paper with numb fingers, staring at the identical sketches I'd drawn late at night in our kitchen. The same ideas, same layout, down to the custom roofline on the north-facing units. Every detail was mine, except the signature. Victor had come out of the bathroom and caught me holding the papers. I'd asked him straight out, "Why are these in your bag?" He barely blinked, just gave me that easy, polished smile that used to charm me. "It's just a concept draft," he said, slipping the plans out of my hand like they didn't matter. One of the junior guys mocked it up. "It's nothing." Then he kissed my forehead and went to check on the food, just like that. Like I hadn't seen what I'd seen. That moment haunted me. He knew I'd recognize my own work. He knew it, and he still acted like it was nothing. Either he thought I wouldn't say anything, or he counted on me not wanting to find out the truth. I didn't want to believe it, but sitting in that quiet house, the air heavy with everything unsaid, I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Something was wrong, not just in our marriage, but in the walls of whatever Victor had been building without me. And maybe, just maybe, I was never supposed to be part of it. I told Victor I needed air. We were 2 hours into the rooftop gala, and every smile I gave felt like it was cracking my face open. The jazz quartet had started their second set. The skyline glowed like a painting, and Victor was mid-conversation with a structural engineer from Detroit. I slipped away quietly, not that he noticed. The interior exhibit halls were mostly empty. Down one glass hallway, I found a dimly lit space filled with kinetic sculptures, strange metal forms that twisted and pulsed on timed motors, casting moving shadows across the walls. I stood there alone, watching one sculpture spin a wire globe inside a wire cube, endlessly revolving. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting a waiter or maybe a stray guest. But it was a young woman in a museum staff blazer, early 20s, dark braid, hands fidgeting at her sides. "Mrs. Renner?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I straightened instinctively. "Yes?" She looked over her shoulder like she wasn't supposed to be here. I'm sorry, I know this is weird. I saw something earlier and I think you need to know." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, still wringing her hands. "Your husband. When you were looking at the art on the mezzanine earlier, I saw him at your table. He picked up your champagne glass. He looked around like he was checking something, and then he poured something into it." I blinked. "What?" He did it really fast. "I thought maybe he was just, I don't know, fixing your drink, but he kept watching you after, like he was waiting." I stared at her. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide. She was shaking. This wasn't a prank. "I didn't drink any of it," I said slowly. She nodded quickly. "I know, I watched. You walked away before you touched it." The words landed heavy and slow, like they were crawling into my skin. I tried to stay calm. I had to. "Are you sure it wasn't just a garnish or something? A refill?" "No." Her voice trembled now. "I've seen him at other events before, a few months ago, same building. Another gala upstairs. He did something weird with a drink then, too. Same kind of thing, picked up someone's glass when they weren't looking. But this time, I just couldn't ignore it." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, heart pounding. She hesitated. "Because if something happened and I didn't say anything, I wouldn't be able to live with myself." There was a beat of silence. "I could be wrong," she added quickly. "Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm just paranoid." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She took a step back, eyes darting toward the exit. "Please don't tell anyone I said anything. I can't afford to lose this job." "I won't," I said quietly. She gave me one last look, something between guilt and fear, and disappeared through the side door. I stood there a long time, alone in the room with the humming sculptures and the echo of her warning. The air felt heavier now, tighter. Had Victor really? I wanted to tell myself it was impossible, that I knew him better than that. But I didn't know him at all anymore, and suddenly I wasn't just angry, I was scared. The rooftop was buzzing when I returned, like nothing had happened. Waiters circled with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. The city lights sparkled around the terrace, and Victor was back at our table, phone in one hand, glass in the other, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He looked up and smiled like everything was fine, but I wasn't the same woman who had left. I walked slowly, rehearsing the motion in my head. It had to look natural, easy, like a toast. like a wife rejoining her husband on a perfect evening to celebrate 10 years of love. "Hey," he said as I reached the table. "You disappeared." "Just needed to cool off," I replied, settling into the chair beside him. My voice was calm. Too calm. Victor slid his phone into his pocket and nodded toward the skyline. "Not a bad view tonight, huh?" I looked past the skyscrapers. I didn't trust myself to meet his eyes just yet. "Beautiful," I said. 2 glasses sat on the table. Identical champagne flutes, both full, both untouched. "This one's yours," he said, nudging a glass toward me. I didn't touch it. Instead, I smiled faintly and picked up the other one, the one he hadn't claimed. I turned it slightly in my hand, watching the bubbles rise. "To 10 years," I said, lifting it. My voice didn't shake. Victor blinked, then raised his own glass, the one that had originally been meant for me. "To 10 years," he echoed. We clinked. He drank first. A normal sip. No hesitation. I followed, only bringing the rim of the glass to my lips, but letting none of it touch my tongue. For a moment, everything was the same. He set his glass down, reached for an appetizer, said something about a blueprint proposal in River North. His tone was casual, effortless, like the Victor I used to know. But something had changed. He dabbed his forehead once, then again. The wind was cool, but beads of sweat were forming at his hairline. Excuse me," he muttered, adjusting his collar. "Is it hot up here?" "No," I said quietly. "It's not." He blinked fast, like trying to clear his vision. "Maybe it's the champagne?" "Maybe," I said, watching him closely. He stood abruptly, knocking his napkin to the floor. His speech stumbled. "Give me a second. I just need air." And then he coughed. Once. Hard. Then again, sharper, like something had caught in his throat. His glass tipped over, the remaining champagne spilling into the white tablecloth. "Victor?" I asked, standing now. People were watching. Conversations halted. He turned toward me, confused, unfocused. Then he collapsed. It happened fast. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Someone screamed. A man in a tuxedo shouted to call an ambulance. I stood frozen as guests gathered, crouching beside him, unsure what they were witnessing. But I wasn't, because I had seen the glass he drank from. I had chosen it for him. And as the chaos erupted around me, I stood still, heart pounding, and thought only one thing. Whatever he planned for me, he just gave to himself. Hospitals always smell like bleach and secrets. I sat in a molded plastic chair outside the trauma wing, my dress stained with champagne and someone else's panic. The emerald satin that once made me feel elegant now clung to my skin like regret. I couldn't remember if I'd taken off my heels. Everything after Victor collapsed was a blur of sirens, questions, and flashing lights. Now it was just me, alone, waiting. A doctor finally stepped through the automatic doors, clipboard in hand, face set in that tight professional calm they all seemed to wear. "Mrs. Renner," I stood, gripping the back of the chair for balance. "Yes," he nodded. "Your husband is stable. He regained consciousness briefly, but he's sedated now. We ran a tox screen. He ingested a high dose of zoloramide." The name didn't mean anything to me at first. I just blinked at him. "It's a central nervous system depressant," he added. "Not recreational. It's typically used in controlled settings, like psychiatric sedation or veterinary procedures. In large amounts, it can suppress breathing, cause confusion, collapse." I felt cold all over. "Are you saying someone drugged him?" The doctor didn't flinch. "We're not making assumptions yet, but this dose wasn't accidental. And given how it entered his system, it was likely ingested, possibly in a drink." I swallowed. My hands were shaking, but I didn't try to hide it. "It was meant for me." His brow lifted. "I'm sorry?" I looked him in the eye. There were 2 glasses. Someone warned me, a staff member. She said she saw him pour something into mine. I switched them. He stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You believe your husband intended to drug you?" "Yes," I said, voice steady now. "And I believe he's done it, or something close to it part before, at other events. Maybe to others." He exhaled and looked down at the clipboard. "We're required to report intentional poisonings. The authorities will need a statement." "I understand," I said. "I'll give them whatever they need." For a moment, he studied me. "You saved your own life," he said. not quite a question. I didn't plan to, I whispered. But I listened. He gave a small nod and handed me a form. Someone from the police will speak with you shortly. He turned and walked away. I sat back down. The fluorescent lights above hummed quietly. I stared at the sterile white tiles and tried to breathe. Victor had tried to erase me, quietly, neatly, with a poisoned toast and a smile, but he failed. And now, the man who had spent a decade building empires on charm and concrete was lying unconscious in a hospital bed, a victim of his own calculation. And I was still here, bruised, shaken, but alive. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Victor's leather satchel still hung from the hallway hook, and his watch charger blinked blue beside the bed. But I kept walking past it all like I was touring someone else's life. The morning after the hospital, I took off the emerald dress and threw it in the laundry sink. I didn't bother washing it, just left it there like a piece of evidence. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of habit. Julia? The voice was older, hesitant. It's Carl Lannon. We worked together on the Milwaukee Riverfront project years ago. Carl, I said, surprised. It's been a while. I heard about Victor, he said quickly. Look, I wouldn't call if it weren't important, but wapa. You need to know something. I was reviewing permits for a new high-rise proposal. It was flagged for inconsistencies. They listed you as a design consultant. Only the signature isn't yours. I felt my stomach twist. You're sure? I worked with you, Julia. I know how you sign. This wasn't just sloppiness. It looks like someone forged it. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I thought maybe it was a clerical mistake, Carl continued. But then I saw your firm's name on the proposed transfer documents, as if you'd agreed to shift certain assets to a new leadership group in case of legal incapacity. The phrasing's strange, overly formal, like it was drafted to hold up in court if someone challenged it. My voice came out flat. You think Victor forged my name? I think he was preparing for something, Carl said. And now, with what happened, I'd look into it. After we hung up, I stood frozen in the hallway, keys still in my hand. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with clarity. I went straight to Victor's home office. The door creaked open. I had never needed a key before, but I had always respected his space, trusted that what was his was also mine, not anymore. I pulled out drawers, opened cabinets, scanned through his sleek filing system. Most of it looked legitimate, until I got to the safe tucked behind a false panel. The combination hadn't changed. It clicked open like it had been waiting for me. Inside were thumb drives, manila folders, and a black binder labeled Contingency Planning. The binder held documents I had never signed, pages assigning executive power of my firm to a holding company I'd never heard of, legal forms tied to shell accounts, a document stating I had recently exhibited erratic behavior, and that my decision-making capacity was under clinical review. There were even draft letters to investors, outlining a smooth leadership transition at Renner Studio should I become unavailable. I closed the binder slowly. Victor hadn't wanted to destroy me out of rage or revenge. He had wanted to disappear me, quietly, surgically, because it made business sense. My silence wasn't just convenient, it was an asset. I backed out of the office, my pulse hammering, and went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a fresh notebook, began documenting everything: phone calls, signatures, timestamps, scanned copies, every piece of this web, because now I knew how close I'd come, not just to losing my company, but to losing my name. By the end of the week, the story broke. It started with whispers, a headline buried on the business page of a local outlet: prominent developer hospitalized amid criminal investigation. No names at first, just a few vague mentions of a medical incident and legal concerns involving permits and financial disclosures. But in our world, the tight-knit circle of architects, engineers, and civic planners, everyone knew who it was. Victor Renner, the man who used to walk into city council meetings with confidence sharp enough to slice glass, was now the subject of rumors, subpoenas, and speculation. I stayed silent. When reporters called, I declined to comment. When friends texted, I replied only with, "I'm cooperating fully," because I was. Detectives showed up 2 days after the hospital. 2 plainclothes officers, polite but direct, sat with me in the studio's glass conference room, and slid a recorder across the table. "Mrs. Renner, are you willing to submit a sworn statement?" the younger one asked. "Yes," I said. They asked about the gala, about the drink, about the warning from the museum docent. I gave them Leah's name, her description, everything I remembered. Then they moved on to the documents I'd found. I handed over digital backups, screenshots, notarized copies. I opened Victor's contingency binder, pointed out forged signatures and fraudulent transfers, explained how they were meant to shift ownership of my company behind my back. They didn't say much, just took notes, a lot of notes. When we finished, the older detective glanced up from his folder. "You understand what you're doing here, Mrs. Renner?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "I'm telling the truth. The fallout was quick." Victor was formally charged with attempted poisoning and felony financial fraud. His attorneys claimed it was a medical misunderstanding exacerbated by industry stress. But the tox report didn't lie. And neither did the forged paperwork. His team scrambled to spin it. His investors scattered. Some of our mutual friends sent polite messages of support, carefully worded like they were hedging bets. Others disappeared altogether. I wasn't surprised. Reputation was currency in our circle, and people don't like associating with a scandal they can't control. I didn't go to the arraignment. Instead, I sat alone in my office, a cup of black coffee cooling on the desk beside me, and reopened the blueprints for a housing project I'd shelved 6 months ago. It was mine. Every curve, every line, every community detail, mine. I picked up a red pencil, not to erase, but to begin again. 3 months passed. I still woke up some nights with my heart racing, reaching for something that wasn't there, but I didn't wake up in fear. Not anymore, just memory. A fading echo of a man I once thought I knew, and a version of myself who trusted too long. Therapy helped. Twice a week with a woman named Dr. Sharma, who didn't flinch when I told her everything. She didn't look shocked when I said the word poison, didn't try to twist it into metaphor. She just asked, "And what do you want to do with the survival?" At first, I didn't know. Now I do. The firm is stronger than ever. I cleaned house, replaced our finance team, rewrote the bylaws, added oversight protocols that make it impossible for a single person to manipulate ownership again. We lost a few old clients, people loyal to Victor or just scared of bad press. But we gained better ones, people who wanted to work with someone who had come through fire and didn't blink. I gave Leah a job, the museum docent who warned me that night, the woman who might have saved my life with 5 whispered sentences, now works by my side as my personal assistant. When I offered, she cried. When I asked if she'd ever considered design, her face lit up. She starts classes in the fall. I told her, "You notice something others ignored." That's the beginning of every good architect, knowing what doesn't belong. I started speaking too, quietly at first. Small gatherings of women in design, mentorship luncheons, panels about power imbalances in creative industries. Then larger audiences, keynotes, conferences. People were hungry for it. Not gossip, not the scandal, but the truth inside it. How coercion doesn't always look like fists or shouting. Sometimes it looks like shared bank accounts and smiles at galas. Sometimes it's a blueprint with your name erased. I stood on a stage in Minneapolis last week and said, I used to think my silence was loyalty. Now I know it was a warning bell I ignored. They gave me a standing ovation, but I didn't need it. I just needed to be heard. Victor's trial is set for next spring. I don't plan to testify. The evidence speaks for itself. My voice is being used elsewhere now. Not in defense of the past, but in design of the future. Every new project my firm takes on now has my fingerprints, my signature, and my permission. And if there's one thing I tell every woman who listens, whether she's fresh out of school or 20 years in, it's this. Trust your instincts. You don't need proof to believe yourself. You don't need permission to take back your story. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not drafting in someone else's shadow. I'm building in daylight.